Okay, here we're going to look at some graphs of the cube root function, the cube root of x. And here on our axes, I have put the parent graph, y equals the cube root of x. And here we have a couple of transformations. So here we have x plus 8 underneath the radical. That's in our argument. So this is going to move. I'm going to write transformations over here to keep a list going. That's going to move the graph 8 to the right. That plus 1 will move it up 1. And our 2 will be a vertical stretch because it's greater than 1. And for both the domain and the range, we have all real numbers. So wanting a few points, right? We already said we're going to go, oh, I said 8 right. That was a mistake. Hopefully you all caught that at home. That should have been 8 left. Hopefully a lot of you are going, oh, good. Thought I was incorrect. So we're going 8 left, 1 up. So one of our points will be negative 8, 1. And then if I can find x and y intercepts, if they're going to be integers, I think those are good points to find. So if I substitute 0 in for x, right, I'm going to get the cube root of 8 plus 1. Well, the cube root of 8 is 2, times 2 is 4, so that's 0, 5. And then I'm going to try to find the y or x intercept by substituting 0 in for y, subtract 1, divide by 2. Cube both sides, we get negative 1 over 8 equals x plus 8. X equals negative 8 and 1/8. So not an integer, but it's a pretty good point. It's pretty close to negative 8 on our graph. Okay, so here's our points. So we have negative 8, 1. We have 0, 5. And we have negative 8. Oh, I put that at negative 7. So here. And negative 1/8, 0. Okay, so I know my graph is going to come from down here. Going to come up. That's this point here has been moved 8 to the left and 1 up. And you can see there's this vertical stretch that this one does not have. Okay, looking at our second graph. So again, we're going to list our transformations. So the x minus 1, that goes 1 to the right. The negative 2 is going to move it 2 down. The 1/2 will be a vertical shrink. And the negative here in front will reflect about the x-axis. So this graph will flip that way around the x-axis. Okay, so let's see. We are moving, as we said, we're going to go 1 to the right and 2 down. So 1 to the right, 2 down. So now we know we have that point 1, negative 2. Finding other points, I'm going to substitute 0 in. So y of 0, doing a little bit of our arithmetic down here. You can certainly do this on your calculator. So 0 minus 1 is negative 1. Well, the cube root of negative 1 is negative 1. Times negative 1/2 is positive 1/2. So we get 1/2 minus 2. So that's negative 1.5 or negative 3/2. And then looking at our function, again, wanting integers, I'm going to substitute negative 7. And I do that because when I substitute negative 7, I'm going to get negative 8, which is a perfect cube. Oop, I wrote plus 8. That should have been plus 2, right? Or that's a minus 2. So let's see, minus 2. So that's negative 2. That's going to be 1 minus 2 or negative 1. So we have negative 7, negative 1. Okay, so putting that on our set of axes here. So I have 0, negative 3/2. So that would be right there. And then negative 7, negative 1 would be right there. And so we're going to come from here. And we come down, and then we're going to flip that way. So notice how we're taking this graph and reflecting it around the x-axis. And then notice that we also have a vertical shrink, which we talked about here. And that's due to the 1/2, taking out the negative portion, because that has a different effect, but just the 1/2. And notice that compared to especially this graph here, which is the parent graph, that we are much narrower than the original graph. So there's a couple of transformations using our cube root function. Hope that helps, and we'll see you real soon.